So welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining me for this webinar today. My name is Nick and I've been with the Information Lab for just over 2 years, which actually means that I will be coming out of the data school in February. So my time is almost up with the Information Lab. Not quite how I pictured the last year of my time with such a great company going, but it is what 2020 brings us. So over the last 2 years, I've gained a bunch of different experience of different data usages across several industries. And I've really enjoyed my time with the Information Lab and hoping to go in February, go into something a bit more environmental related because data is everywhere, data is being used all around. So hopefully that can help. But it was earlier this year during our first lockdown that I set up a coffee chat with the Information Lab, which then brings us to this webinar, which I've called We Need to Talk, using Alteryx to set up paired catch-ups to keep the team in touch, which is something that a lot of us will need after this year, and pulling that team together is never a bad thing. So I'd like to start off this webinar by just introducing that idea. So what is a coffee chat? What is that idea? Well, the idea is to set up random chat pairings each week to give a bit of a space to get away from only talking about work. So giving a guilt-free space to get to know each other in a bit more of a personal sense, as well as just professionally, as well as just talking about work-related items. So hopefully talking about what you've been up to, or maybe what you've got planned, or some of the odd hobbies you picked up around whilst being stuck in the house. And the idea of this really came out when we had a whole new cohort of starters, and just noticed that they didn't really have a platform to get to know people outside of their own cohort, or those that are teaching them. And within the Information Lab, within the office, would usually have a few meetups and the drinks on Fridays, and the occasional party here and there. But obviously none of this ever happened, and this was such a great place for people to get to know each other. And as well, for those that have been in the company or in your team for a longer while, most people have their kind of cliques of people that they would regularly talk to and would feel comfortable reaching out to, just give a casual message to, or ask for a bit of a chat on a call. But you don't tend to reach out to those that you don't know so well. And it is that everyone in the team really knows each other, or would quite happily talk to each other, and at those drinks at the office or at those parties would certainly catch up with each other, or just around the office really. So the hope of these coffee chats was to stir up some of the conversations that would have usually been had during those spaces. And of course, we have Alteryx, so we'll work smart at this and just get Alteryx to do all the hard work for us, so we can just enjoy it on the other side. So let's just get a little bit of an overview of the setup. What are we using to set this up? Well, to start with, for the list of names, we have set up a Google Sheet that everyone in the company has access to. And within that Google Sheet, we have a column for name and their email, and later on added in an extra column for an off next week flag. So that was something that we kind of developed after a month or so. And this Google Sheet was then advertised internally, and those that wanted to join in could just put their name down, put their email down, and no one was forced to join, but if you wanted to, you could. We then took that list of names and created a workflow to create random pairings. So this goes ahead and just chooses a random pair from that list. Make sure that the pair hasn't been matched before, because we don't want to be creating a repeated pair and putting someone with the same person twice in 2 weeks, or kind of allowing for that possibility. And then took this workflow and turned it into an iterative macro so that we could pair up the entire list all at once. This macro was then used in an overall workflow that sends out emails of the pairings each week and lets people know who they'll be speaking to. And then each pair will just set up the timings between themselves, have their little chat whenever works best for both of them. If it's a busy week, can always delay it. And if it's kind of too much for either one, then they can sort out between the two. And we'll take a look at those workflows in just a minute. We'll dive into Alteryx. But first, let's quickly recap what an iterative macro is. So macros within Alteryx are just a set of tools that have been packaged up into a single tool, which can then be used in another workflow. And there's a few types of macros within Alteryx, and each of those macros has a defining feature about them. But it was an iterative macro that was used for the coffee chats. And Alteryx on their website gives the definition of an iterative macro as an iterative macro will run through every record and then loop records back through the workflow, repeating the entire process as many times as is specified or until a condition is met. So that's how Alteryx describes it. And it's just essentially an iterative macro will just run a same process over and over again until we hit a condition. So the process looks a little bit like this. If you imagine that little blue blob in the middle is our iterative macro, we'll bring in our data. We'll take that data input and we'll run that through the process. It goes through our macro, and then we make a check. Has the goal been met? If the goal has not been met, then that data will loop back in, go back to the start and repeat the process again. And when it comes to the end of that process, we ask it once again, has the goal been met? If the goal hasn't been met, then we repeat that process. It loops back around, feeds itself back into the start of the process and repeats. But when the goal is met, the macro stops running and the result is then outputted. So in our case, with our iterative macro, a nice little coffee mug there for our iterative macro, we just want to keep on creating random pairs until there is no one left to pair. So looking at that same kind of animation example there, we take our list of names, that's our input data. We run through and randomly pick a pair and just check, has everyone been matched? If the answer to this is no, there's still people to match, then we feed that continued list back into the front of our iterative macro and create a new pair. And when that pair has been created, we check once again, is everyone matched? If there's still people to match, we go back around and do it again. But when everyone is matched, then the results are outputted. We get a list of all the pairings of everyone within our original list of names, and we can then take that list and start to tell people who they'll be talking to in the week. So that's a bit of the theory behind it. And if there was any more questions around iterative macros, very happy to take those at the end. But as with a lot of these things, it's usually best to just dive in and see how this works. So let's head over to Alteryx and we'll take a look at these workflows. So I've got my workflows loaded up here and I'll just give them a run so we can take a look at what the data is doing. And I was going to start off with looking at the pairing macro, that workflow that's the real workhorse behind it, and is creating those random pairs. So this is what it looks like, and it's already set up as a macro, but we'll look at how that's done as well. Over at this side, the first thing that we see is that we have our names list. And taking a look at this, I've anonymized the list of names because I didn't want to give out emails and names and everything. But here we have it, just name and email. Really simple. The first section, what we're going to be doing is to just take that first pair. So a nice classic way of doing this is to create a random number and then order by the random number. And this top branch just goes ahead and takes the first person off of that list. And this second branch just takes the second person from the list. The rest of the list is taken down here, and we will certainly deal with them because we want to create a pair for everyone, but we'll just put them on the back burner for now and think about them a little bit later on. And first, we'll just follow this pairing. So we have here Monica and Jack have been paired together. We append these together so we get a nice single row of data. And the next thing that we do is just use a nice join tool to check whether these two have been paired before, which then brings in our second input, which is just our previous pairings. So this is just a piece of data that's written by the overarching workflow. So here we can see that we've got Beth and Eve, Eve and Beth, and we've done this in a two-way implication so that we can join email A equals email A, email B equals email B, and if there's, so either way round, it will catch them. So if they have been met, or they have been paired before, like Monica and Jack have here, then they will come out of the J. I'll give this another little run, and here we have Andrew and Beth being paired together, and they have not been matched before, so they come out of the R output here instead of that J. And those that come out of the R, these are new pairs, so these are ones which are valid for this week's pairings or this week's coffee chat. So the first thing that we do is just flip these names around and union them. So we have, once again, that kind of two-way implication, Beth and Andrew, Andrew and Beth. This is a nice little trick if you're ever creating an iterative macro and you have the error saying that your schema has changed in between runs and you have no idea why that's happened. Just make a little check, stick a select tool just before the output and make sure that you're changing all of the sizing to a large size, because that's what got me, and that was a bit of a frustrating one. So stick that there, make sure that it's all coming out in the right data format, and it's this output where our pairings are going to be kind of outputted into the workflow. Kind of going back up to this checker, I'll see if I can run this and find another pair which has been met before. But like I said, if they have been paired up before, then they will come out of that J. And what we want to do is bring them back around so that we can repair them. And managed to fill in enough words there whilst I was furiously clicking run until we got one which has. So James and Steph, they've already had a chat. We don't want to keep on forcing them to have the chats, so we want to add them back into the list. But we've changed the formatting down here of our data, so we want to just rearrange that. And this is what this section does. We take it from having one row of that pair back down, and you can see them now where we just have name and email, James and Steph. And we take them, and this is where we take the other list of people off of the back burner. So going back over to here, our unpaired lot. We take those through and we're going to union them to any pair that has already been paired together. So in this union is all of our unmatched people as well, and at the bottom we've got James and Steph, the ones that have already been paired up. They will get reshuffled, repaired as we go through. So it's this output then at the end, which is our continued list. This is the list of people that we want to continue to pair up and create that pair for the week. So if we take a little look at the overarching idea of this workflow then, what we want to happen is we have our list of names come in at this end. Excuse my awful drawing. The list of names then comes through, some are paired, and the ones which are new pairs comes down to here and out the other side. And those that aren't come along the top and background and down. And the rest of the continued list also comes through the same way. And this is then outputted here. And what we want this macro to do, and this is why it's iterative, is we want to feed this set of names back in to the start here. So this is where that looping comes in. We want this continued list to be our output and this names list to be our input where the loop happens. And we need to tell Alteryx that this is what we intend it to do. So firstly, when you add in any interface tools, Alteryx will automatically change it over to be a macro or an app. And if it does change it to a macro, it's likely that it'll change it to a standard macro to start with. So let's change that over to an iterative macro. You can get here by just clicking anywhere on the blank canvas. You get your workflow configuration, go over to workflow. We can change this into an iterative macro here, really nice and easy. So now Alteryx knows that it's an iterative macro, but we need to tell it that we intend the data to come from this output and loop back in to this input here. And we can do this by going to View and looking into the Interface Designer. And to get to the setup, we want to go to this cog, which is the Properties tab. Clicking on here, we just get to set up a few of those properties. But the most important bit of an iterative macro are these two here, the iteration input and the iteration output. So this is what we were talking about when we are taking a list of names from the end and feeding it back in. Where do we want to feed it back in? Well, we want to feed it into the names list. And where are we taking that output from? We're taking it from the continued list. So this is where it pays to give your outputs and inputs a nice name, so it's really easy to make that choice and make sure you're getting the right ones. We also need to set our maximum number of iterations. So with this, there is a slight kind of, I guess, a bug, but not quite a bug. But if the last two people left to be matched have already been matched, we'll go through, it has to match those two people together. It will check, have they been matched? Yes or no? Yes, they have. So feed them back in to be rematched. And this will just keep on looping. So I want to put in a maximum number of iterations to stop this from just looping on forever. And 2n, or where n is the number of people, should do that. So we want to allow enough iterations that we make sure we get everyone, but not too many that it just annoys us with how long it goes on for. What do we want to happen when that is hit? Well, let's error it so it stops working. And I'm not going to worry about the output node. I don't know too much about what those do, but we will have the same output schema each run. So we'll leave it as that. And did tell a little lie to you there where the most important bit is your iteration input and output. Of course, that's not true. Your most important bit is the icon you're creating. So the icon is going to be what's shown on your tool. So here's your join tool. Your union tool has that DNA strand on it. You can pick a standard icon, but let's give it a nice cool coffee cup to really let us know that this is what we're doing with this macro. So that's the setup there for our iterative macro. We've told Alteryx what we intend to do with it. So we can now hide our interface designer, give this a save, and start to use this in a different workflow. So let's check this overarching workflow out then. And once again, got that open up ready for us. And with our workflow, we've got 2 inputs and then 3 main sections with our pairing macro right in the middle there, that lovely coffee mug. We've got the N input, which is our names list. We've got the P input, which is our previously paired list. We've got our P output, which is the new pairings. And then we've got that I, which is the continued list. And this should always be empty when we've run this, because this is going to be the thing that's essentially our condition for the iterative macro to stop running. The condition is that we have no more names left in that continued list. So here we've got our input. Now, as I mentioned in the slides earlier, we used a Google Sheet form for this, which just made it a lot easier for people to update it and allowed them to just put their own name in when and as they wanted to. But for the interest of not typing in passwords and kind of some of the noise around that on a webinar, I've just replaced this with a standard input. And then, of course, we have our list of previous pairings. I mentioned in the slides that we added in a new field relatively early on into the coffee chats. And this was because I was getting messages from people saying, oh, I'm on holiday next week. Could you just remove me from the chats? I won't be able to chat to anyone. And I was going into the workflow and just manually filtering them out. So we needed to come up with a better way of doing that. And the way that we have now is just this simple off next week flag. So here we see that Tim's off next week, Angelos is off next week. And this filter just checks for that. Out of the F comes everyone with that flag. So Tim, Angelos, and Mo in this case. And if we just follow that stream of data down, we then get to an email reminder. So this is where the email is created saying you don't have a coffee chat partner this week. If you are back next week, please remove that flag and take a look at it here. Hi, Tim. And then that nice bit of text, just reminding them that if they are back, go and remove that flag and you'll be included next week. Kind of took the manual process away from myself and allowed us to do it more efficiently. So for all of those which haven't got that flag associated to them, we plug them into the pairing macro. We've also put the previously paired list into it as well. And we give this a run. I'll give you a run now. So I'll just turn off my output so I don't send emails. There we go. You can do that by just clicking on the canvas and clicking to run time, disable all tools that write an output. And I'll give this a run. So that's 47 people going in and it takes half a second. So really simple and easy. Takes a lot of the faff about moving an Excel cells around or any of that. And we can take a look here. So we've got Emma and Deborah, our first pair, Sam and Kate, the next. And I've done this kind of purposely. I've put in an odd number. So when there is an odd number, the workflow will pair someone up with null, and we can then choose to do something different with them. So here, Luke doesn't have a partner for next week, so we need to let him know that. So following this paired list out of the macro, we come up to our main section at the top, which sends out the emails for the pairings. So I talked about the people with or the one person possibly a week that might not have a pairing. This is where we split them off and we can deal with them differently, write them different emails. For everyone with a pair, we write an email within this report tool, and this just says, "Hi Emma, your coffee chat partner for this week is Deborah C." Gives her email in the brackets. Send them a message or an email, arrange a time that suits you both for a 30-minute catch up, and have a good week. But then for the people that don't, we write a different email. So taking a look here, we say, "Hi Luke, this week there was an odd number of people. Unfortunately, you won't have a coffee chat partner. Sorry about not having a chat for this week. You will have a partner next week." Bring them all back together. Filter out the side where the first name and email are null. And then we go ahead and send off those emails, send those messages to everyone. And this will just automatically go. I don't have to do anything. The only thing is I sometimes get some emails saying I'm not in at the moment, but I do not have to worry at all. And of course, we have that last section, and this section just overwrites that previous list. So we've run this week's pairings. We need to add those pairs to that previous list so that we don't keep on kind of missing pairs. So all we've done, we've got the all pairings and just unioning it with the output of the macro, bringing those all together, and then just overwriting it. So I know that we can just overwrite within an output and we don't need to do this union, but I tend to like this way a little bit better just to avoid it looking like an ordinary output rather than a penned output. So that then is the entire kind of bulk of it. Is a really simple way of running these coffee chats and really simple way of getting the team to talk to each other. It's kind of just giving a bit of that peer pressure so that people would bother to talk to each other, or at least not feel awkward asking for that chat. So very simple pairing, random pairing macro workflow turned into a macro. Put that into an overarching workflow that essentially just sends emails for us. And really nice and simple. And I do have those workflows available for you for download. But I'll quickly now just flick back over to my slides and give a little summary as we are coming to the end now. So in summary, we have that list of names where team members can add their name to the chat list. We then have an iterative macro which runs until everyone has been paired up, a main macro which sends off the emails and updates that previous pairings, and then the individuals of each chat can set up the timings between them. I was trying to think of a few other use cases for this exactly, and maybe it's something along the lines of setting up a buddy system for new cohorts if you're wanting people to have that pairing, or maybe creating pairs for work or study groups if they are needing to work together. But really, I couldn't think of too much. It is a fairly niche use case for iterative macros, but really iterative macros do have a much wider range of uses and are actually really, really powerful. So there are some YouTube videos we have on iterative macros, and there's a bunch of resources online if you did want to learn a little bit more about them. And if you did want to check out these workflows that I've shown you on today's call, then you can download the packaged workflow from till.bi/coffee chat workflow, which is case sensitive. So make sure you've got that with the C's and the W as capitals. And Steph has just put that in the comments there. Thank you very much. So that'll just trigger an automatic download, and you can grab those workflows and use them for your team if you want to. That takes us to the end of the webinar. So thank you very much for joining me today. And I hope you all have a lovely afternoon and holiday period beyond that as well. And really hope that your team could benefit from this in the way that we have within the Information Lab. Um, we do now have some time for questions if there are any. I'll give a pause to read through any.
That's great. Thank you, Nick. It's really interesting to watch. These coffee chats are very popular and have kept a lot of people going through COVID. So it's really great to see how the back end works. We have one question to start with. So you talked through some use cases of the kind of coffee chat pairing side of things. Have you got any other thoughts for things that people might not be familiar with, like the email tool, for example? Any other kind of business cases for that?
Yeah, so like I said, the actual workflow, the actual setup for it is fairly niche, but a few of the things used in there is pretty powerful. So I think initially that Google Sheets connector within Alteryx is an amazing tool. It's so easy for people to go in and update their data. If you're using it like we've done internally with just a simple data set, or if you are using it with clients and they need to update their data very easily, the Google Sheets connector is an amazing input for data. And then for the other side, that email, as you mentioned, the email tool is really useful as well. I've been on a few consulting projects where we've used the email tool to send off notifications if something happens. So using an email tool one side of a join tool or a filter tool where you shouldn't be having any data come through, maybe giving a really simple example is that you've had a return of an order which was never purchased in the start, then we probably want to write an email, send that over and alert us to say item X has been returned, we've given some money back, but we never sold it in the first place. Someone needs to check this out. So the email tool is a really powerful one too. And just like a really simple one, which maybe isn't used quite as much, is a block until done tool. Amazing if you're wanting to write emails, making sure that all the data's there before you process it. And also overwriting data like we were doing with the previous list. The block until done tool can be a real savior there.
Great, thank you. I think that might be all of the questions for now. Thank you again for taking us through that. Super interesting.
Brilliant, no worries, very welcome indeed. So yeah, thank you very much for joining me all, and I hope you do have that lovely afternoon and enjoy the festive period.